show up on video sometime in the future. I just want you to be prepared. Um, don't feel like you need to turn off your cameras, but I just wanted to make sure that you are aware. As we move on to our next slide, first would like to just introduce myself. My name is Omari Gay. I'm the Senior Director for Program Approval and Quality. And joining me today are my two directors. We have Kendall Samla, who'll be presenting with me today. Kendall is the Director of Program Approval with our team, as well as the Program Quality Manager for Queens North. And for those of you who are working very closely with Soteria Stavroulakis, as she is redeployed into teaching again in person. When that opens back up, Kendall will be supporting all of you as well during her time back at teaching. And also joining us is Tanya Navas. Tanya is the Director of Program Quality with our team. And she'll be helping us to sort of go through this workshop today. So the goal today on our agenda is we want to definitely talk through assessment and accountability. It's one of the 4 quality indicators for the New York State Education Department for CTE. And so today we'll be addressing that. We'll talk through identifying the appropriate technical assessments for your CTE program, and then dig a little bit deeper into the requirements for that 3rd component of your technical assessment, and why that's important. We'll definitely talk about how to monitor student achievement. And so I want to make sure that we are clear as to the different ways we're doing that, whether it's through the record book in CTS and other formats. I also want us to be clear about how we and you should be evaluating your CTE program each year. And so we'll touch upon that. And one of those areas we'll talk through is as well is the employability profile, which is extremely important for all of your students for different sort of end results. So that's what will take place today. And then when we look at sort of from the New York City district-wide objective, we want to make sure that we're going to create some clear, we can go to the next slide. We want to create some clear systems and structures for you to, for one, to identify, and then two, to just actually the use of the appropriate assessments, appropriate accountability strategies for your CTE programs. And again, as we mentioned earlier, this will include monitoring your student achievements, evaluating your CTE programs, making sure that we have a system in place that knows that you are, it's showing the progress of your CTE programs and areas where we may be able to improve and areas where we're doing a great job and continue to move forward with that. So that is the goal for today. As we move on to the next slide, I wanted to just be clear that there are a few things that I want to make sure you are aware of, sort of as updates, before we sort of jump right into assessment and accountability. A couple of things to be mindful of. One is you all should have received by now a request and the link for completing a request for the CTE endorsement seals or the CTE diploma seals. This is due tomorrow. So if you have not done so yet, please make sure that you do that. This is going to help me in understanding how many CTE diploma seals or endorsement seals we need to distribute to your schools. The basis for this count should be at minimum the total number of students that you expect to complete the CTE course. That's at minimum. If assessments are waived, then only students who complete their CTE course, that participate in work-based learning experiences, and then pass the 3-part technical assessments are eligible for CTE endorsement. Now, again, the expectations of whether or not technical assessments are going to be waived, we still do not know. So I would use as your standard right now at minimum, total number of students that you expect that will complete the CTE courses, because those are the only ones at the sort of end of things that can take the technical assessments if it's not waived. All right, use that as your number basis. We will work in that. We will order our CTE diploma seals and make sure that they are distributed to you appropriately. Another thing to keep in mind is that um, on Monday, January 25th, and I think again on Friday, the 29th, an email went out from our colleague Christiane Luchetto, and this was regarding the COVID contingency plan for operationally approved nurse assisting programs. Understand this, for NICET approved programs, so be submitting amendments. There's some flexibility for CNA programs to add pre-assessments for students to be eligible for a 4+1 and a technical endorsement for graduation. You should select a pre-assessment for one of two options. The first is the NOCTI nurse assisting written and performance. That's as a pre-assessment. The second option uses two assessments together. And so it's the precision nurse assisting for the written and the NOCTI nurse assisting performance exam. So again, there are two options. One is the NOCTI nurse assisting written and performance all in one as the pre-assessment. The second option is using two assessments together, and you would use the Precision Nursing Assistant written and then the NOCTI Nurse Assistant Performance exam. And so those would be your options for that. All right. Any programs that have not already submitted your approved program amendment forms and you wish to do so, remember that the deadline has been extended to this Thursday, February 4th. So please, if that's something that you intend to do, submit your completed amendment to your CTE program quality manager so that we can review this and make sure that I can submit it to NICET immediately. I will make sure that we get that done for you. The next thing I wanted you to be aware of for all CTE programs that expire this year, June 30th of 2021, the deadline to submit all required documents for your reapproval application is March 5th. You're going to hear these dates a lot. We're going to jump on this really heavy because of the change in no longer having a lapsed application. What that means for you is that there are a number of us who are comfortable with sort of going past June 30th, and we still have the time to complete a reapproval or a lapsed application. That doesn't exist anymore, which means your program will become non-approved and you would lose funding at this point. And so we want to avoid that at all costs. So first step, submitting any of the documents that are required for your reapproval, that's March 5th. The deadline to complete your external review is May 7th. So I do want to thank all of you who have already completed your external reviews and are sort of moving forward. But for those of us who still need to schedule, remember that May 7th is the final day for us to complete your external review, not schedule it, but complete it. The deadline to submit your reapproval application, again, is June 30th, 2021, this June 30th. And as I mentioned, there's no longer a lapsed application with NICET. So what this means is that last period between July 1st and December 31st is no longer. So if your reapproval application is not submitted by June 30th, your CTE program will lose approval status with NICET, and you will lose Perkins funding eligibility. So we're going to make sure that we avoid that at all costs and make sure that this is done for you. All right.
Omari?
Yes.
In the chat, someone is asking what the deadline is for new approval.
So the new approvals the deadline is October 1st. Here's what I'll say to that point, however. Just as in this year, it was clear to us that you starting off this school year with everything that we had to do with reorganizing our students' lives, I anticipated being just as challenging to start the school year and prepare your application to be submitted by October 1st. And so I suggest that you use the same deadlines for the reapproval applications for your first time applications. And I think you'll be in a great position to win with that. So now we're gonna dive a little deeper into one of the, again, the 4 NICET quality indicators, assessment and accountability. Well, we'll begin with identifying and selecting like the appropriate technical assessments for your CTE program. So at this time, I'm gonna turn things over to our Director of Program Approval and Program Quality Manager for Queens North, Kendall Samlal. Kendall?
Thank you, Amari. So when you're selecting a technical assessment, I know folks always hear the term that you got to choose the right one. So what does that really mean, right? You have to look back at your program, and this is more so for the folks who are looking to gain initial approval. When you're looking at your program of study, there's a term that is sort of looked upon as, what is the identity of your program, right? What is actually the substance of your program of study? Because once you identify that, then you'll be able to pick an assessment which would now assess all parts of this program. And then you're going to break that up into your different courses that will prepare you, or should say prepare the students to pass this technical assessment. Now, the technical assessment, as Momari mentioned before, consists of 3 components. A written component, which is the part 1. Part 2 is your performance-based. And part 3, which is school-based, which is either a project or portfolio. Now, part 1 and part 2 must be created and it's derived by a industry recognized vendor. And when you're looking at that, you can actually, if you happen to let me rephrase that again. In the past, there used to be a list. That list doesn't exist. So if anyone has the old list of exams and things which would be qualifying for CDOS 4+1 or the old technical assessment stuff, you can use that as a reference, but there's no longer a list that NICET goes by. Because of the fact that once you're an approved program, your technical assessment is now quantifiable for a 4+1 and fulfills all those different requirements. The reason for doing away with this particular list is also they did away with the process of how a particular vendor or a particular exam, which was not there before, didn't have to go through this long separate process in order to be considered. So if you have a program that's very innovative, or you find that there are assessments which were done previously by other programs, but it doesn't really fit your program because, again, you are reflecting on what is your program of study, then once you go through this process of becoming approved, that technical assessment now will be eligible for the 4+1 just by being the technical assessment for an approved program. So one of the things that you want to look at, even if you're looking at an old assessment that's out there from a vendor, because a lot of vendors have a lot of lists, is that you want to go through your blueprints, right? You want to make sure that the blueprints are identifying what you are going to be holding the students accountable for. And in that case, and then that's also going to be one of the requirements when you are applying for your program for state approval or reapproval, is that we have to submit those blueprints because it's going to be scrutinized as well with the other artifacts. Now, another thing that we always encourage folks to do is that in choosing the appropriate technical assessment is that you engage your industry folks, right? As well as your post-secondary. But also important with industry is that you want to make sure that this technical assessment is still up to date, it's still valid, especially when you're referring to stuff in IT. It is, these things are always evolving, as you all know, and it's sometimes it evolves very quickly. So you want to make sure you get an assessment which is relevant to the standards and the skills which are needed in today's market. So coming back down to just recapping again what I just mentioned, once all of this, you show the alignment with your coursework preparing students for the technical assessment and towards those technical skills, these are all reviewed by NICET. And once NICET has deem that everything is appropriate, then they are going to now approve it, and then that now makes a technical assessment. And again, you have to have all three parts be considered to be options for 4+1, and your other CDOT stuff. Next slide. So the technical assessment, again, as I mentioned before, is nationally recognized and it has to be based on industry standards. So I want to take this time here to just focus on the fact that the demonstration part of the technical assessment, some of you may actually pick assessment where both parts 1 and part 2 is done on the computer. So being the fact that the computer or the system in which that you're logging into is administering and grading the technical assessment, that fits the requirement where it is that it is independently administered and graded. Now, for some folks, you will be able to have the written component be administered online or via a computerized assessment. And then you would then have to now do a practical for the students. Now, when you're doing that, and you have to have an in-person student demonstration done, you need the teacher on record cannot be the person administering or grading that exam. It needs to be done, again, independently by one of your partners, right? Now, or I should say an industry professional. So in some situations, especially where we have like the NICER, where teachers themselves are NICER certified in which they can administer. You also have a lot of our trades, hardcore trades, one with like plumbing, electrical, where the teachers themselves still hold those industry credentials. And in those regards, those teachers can help grade that, but they cannot be there under the premise of a teacher. They would have to be there under the premise of that industry professional. So they would have to be working with you as under their industry license, not represented as a teacher. And this is where we encourage folks who may not have as many industry partners to be able to come in to do this, that if you work within your career sector and with different schools, then you can be able to have someone at another school come in and grade, and you guys can swap that way. And that's the way we can share resources. Your school-based project or portfolio. Now, you have to decide on which one it is. If you decide to do both, then it's going to necessarily be you're requiring students to actually do both. So if you are doing any of these, we would need to have a breakdown of a description of either or a project or portfolio and a rubric. Now, for project based assessments, the rubric is going to be relating directly to your project at hand in terms of what you're going to be assessed. And the portfolio, because it's going to be a collaboration of different works throughout a set time frame, each work is going to have its own rubric that you're grading as the student accumulates it over time. Now, what we need is a overall portfolio rubric grading all of the works that's in the portfolio. So we need an overall description of what that portfolio should contain, and then a rubric to how you're grading that overall portfolio, the overall body of work. Now, the school-based, now the third component is because it's school-based, can be graded by the teacher on record. It can be graded by anyone who is appropriately knowledgeable of the field in which to grade. So in some situations, some people may say, well, I have so many different industry partners and some of them can help me grade it, then by all means, you can do that as well. But I just want to let folks know that you do have the option to have the teachers grade the third component. So, yeah, sorry, Tanya, you can go on. Now, for your those NICER approved programs, when you, as mentioned before, Mari just mentioned a special situation going on right now with our healthcare folks who need to do clinical hours. Once you're an approved program, and this applies to not just only changing your technical assessment, but basically when you're changing anything about the program, you want to be able to submit your amendment form first, right? Do the amendment form, get that submitted to your PQM so they can review it. That would then be facilitated to Amari, who would then escalate it up to state ed. You would then receive a notice that it has been either approved or denied. Once you've had it approved, then you'll be able to implement those changes. You cannot expect to have to institutionalize or change something and then fill out the amendment form and think that whatever the changes are may be able to be backdated. There are some things which it will not be able to, and that may actually cause confusion for students, especially students who are looking for, if you're changing a class or credit allocation and they're looking towards that for graduation, it may or may not stop that process if it happens, depending on when this amendment form is submitted and approved. Next slide. So I know a lot of you have received information in regards to the proposed waivers. So as with last year, if a waiver is approved and for the Regents exam, stuff like that, then the technical assessments would also be waived as well. Now, while there is no, while there may be a chance for the technical assessment to be waived, and if it does happen and it is waived, that does not necessarily mean that you do not, that you cannot administer the technical assessment. There are opportunities for where students may need this technical assessment for them to be competitive in industry, because it's also industry credential. And some of you may have already purchased the technical assessment. It may be hard for you to reassign it to next year or have it roll over. So I would say that please reach out to your program quality manager, as if this does play out this way, and even if it doesn't, please reach out to your quality manager this week in regards to the preparation and preparing your students for the technical assessments and what's available, so that you can go back as a team and decide on what would be best for the students and being able to administer it. Because we did release some information about extended permits, which could be used to have students come in to be prepared for their taking the technical assessment. But but again, just come back to it right now. It is a proposal right now for waivers. I believe that until I think Friday, that they're taking any suggestions from folks in which to do it. Now, for our data collection and record keeping, as you all know, we are transitioning into CTS. And while that transition is going, and that's so eloquently put by quite a number of few people, we are building the ship as we're flying it, right? So please, folks, there are going to be, when we speak about these things, this is what ultimately what we're working towards. And anyone who would be needing to utilize any of the system or reference any of the documents in order for their first initial approval as well as their reapprovals, please speak with your program quality manager in terms of how we can document what you need. Because right now, as Amari mentioned before, it is time sensitive that we get these applications in, and so we want to make sure that we follow the guidelines in terms of when we need all of the information in, so that we can schedule those external reviews. So one of the things is that what you want to have to upload is the technical components grades into ATS. This is right now something that it's already in the system in STARS. For those of you who have approved programs, nothing has changed so far in the system. I know that we are currently right now working on having a backup code in case that the waiver does go through. So by the end of the week, we should have that ready and to go. if this decision happens to come down that way for the code for the waivers, so you can put in for your technical assessments, the grades. If it does not happen, then you would need to input pass. We always recommend doing the pass or fail grades for the technical assessments and for 1 and 2, because of the fact that some technical assessment vendors have cut scores which change. So not every year the grade, what passing grades would be the same. One year it could be 65, the next year it needs to be 85. Now, all components of the technical assessments would need to be reported into CTS. And as I mentioned before, this piece of the pie has not been fully fleshed out yet in CTS. So in the meantime, we would like for you to keep that into your record book, so that when it is available, you can transfer the data. Now, in CTS, we do have the WBL record book report, which is coming, and that report is going to be able to, when it's run, take the data from different parts of CTS, including your student participation data in terms of the activities they're doing, the data that's being done, submitted by you in terms of coursework that they're passing, as well as the, for the end, the students who may have done certain components of technical assessment, because we all know that there are some programs which offer technical assessments in the 11th grade. So if that is the case, then when you run a WBL record report in the 12th, so this way you can catch any seniors who may have slipped through the cracks, this will be available for you. In the meantime, since all the components in order to run the report is still in development in CTS, we do want you to continue using your WBL record book that we've been asking for the last 2 to 3 years. Those programs who are new and would like to have more information about how you could have your own record book, please reach out to your PQM and they will be able to assist you with that. Your employability profile. So there's some, I just want to just clarify this. The actual employability profile itself is a report which would be one that we're going to be able to run. Omari had worked very well with the NICET team, and we've come up with a template for New York City. And it's going to pull from the data that you're putting into CTS. The framework is already there for the report. We just need to get the rest of the information in terms of linking it to your skills that you have in the technical skills, as well as the student activities. Training plans and the supervised evaluations, these are all going to be things that we will be able to run when CTS is fully up and running. However, right now, if anyone has any samples of these that you're using right now, please upload those into the document tab of the CTS. Next slide. All right, so at this point, folks, we've actually saved a few minutes. I know that in the past, we've had a little bit shorter time for us to have these very rich and rigorous conversations. So today we're going to do a different format, and instead of having breakout groups, it's going to be more of an open forum for folks to talk. So it's going to be similar to that of office hours. So if you feel free to take yourself off of mute and you can contribute, or if you want, you can also text it into the chat. Omar, you want to lead with the first question?
First of all, thank you, Kendall, for that. It was really helpful. I'm hoping that this was helpful to all of you as far as really preparing for this aspect of your CTE program. If it hasn't been made clear already, you're hearing us talking more and more about assessment and accountability and its direct impact on funding, which is obviously bigger now than ever, right? Because of the lack of funding that is happening all around. And so So this was extremely important. I do want to touch upon a question that I see in the chat with Lori about helping first year programs with first year program approval and keeping records. And so you hear us very frequently say, speak with your program quality manager. And I want to be clear, the reason why we say that is because the process can be very different for each program. And so our program quality managers are incredible with understanding specific situations of a school and of a program and being able to then say, here's what we need to do next. And so I definitely encourage us all, like, even if you haven't done this already, to just reach out to your program quality manager and say, hey, can do you have 30 minutes where we can just sit down and just map out the game plan for us? And they will go through each step. Here's what we should have done by tomorrow. Here's what we should have done by next week, by next month, and so forth, right? And this will be specific to you and your workload and your CTE program, and oftentimes very specific to the industry of your program. And so I just want to be clear that it's not a sort of a dismissive comment, but it is clear for us that the one-on-one coaching for this is really important. And so that's why we say that very often. So I want to put that out there. But I want to be able to answer, and we can be able to answer any other questions that you may have at this time.
So there's a comment in the question about does the assessments have to be given in the senior year only? So the assessments are supposed to be a cumulative assessment. So you can't choose a technical assessment that you're going to give halfway through the program and then still have another half of the program that's going to be taught to students, another half of skills which are not going to be assessed upon. So it has to be done towards the end of the program of study. There's some programs that run from 9 to 11, so you don't have to administer it in the 12, you can administer it in the 11th grade. Now there's some programs, or some assessments I should say, which need to be spread out. So you can offer part 1 in the 11th, like if you have a 9 to 12 or a 10 to 12 sequence, you can offer assessment each year, right? So you can have a written component which could be done in 11th grade and the practical which could be done in senior. I've seen one where students are actually doing the written in 10th, practical 11th, and then the project and portfolio was being focused on the 12th year. If this in any of these scenarios, you have to be able to articulate how this is most appropriate for your students and how it is that doing the assessment this way is more effective and actually beneficial to not just the student, but towards the entire process itself of assessing all of their skills. Another question was from Josh. Now there's something that we've always mentioned before in the past where if the students have enough knowledge to take the assessment and they do it in the junior year, they can also then, if something goes wrong and the student happens to fail, then they can get reinforcement and then have an opportunity to take it again in the 12th. So again, the question that keeps coming up in the chat about record keeping and where to keep the data. So our hopes and the plan is that once CTS is fully up and running, this will be your hub. In addition to, in terms of where you're going to formally keep this information, once you've gathered it at the school level, there are different things that you can do, different technique, best practices, which your program quality manager will be able to share with you, depending on your school size, your the career or the subject at hand in terms of what is the program of study, and also too, and just not just on the program side, but your support side, because this is really a team effort, folks. And whenever you have just one person doing something and something goes down, then everything goes down with that one person. So when you have a team effort, then you have multiple hands who would be able to not just only lend support and knowledge and expertise, but also be there in case something goes adverse.
Yeah, I want to just piggyback on what Kendall has just said. So you guys know that this afternoon, 12:45 this afternoon, we have a school leaders meeting with all principals and assistant principals for your CTE. For you, one of the agenda items will be just that, and we hear this and are very clear about this from you, and would like to reiterate and reinforce the thought of CTE as a team concept, and I'm hearing more and more. We're clear. We've seen this over the years now, that we've got some superstar CTE teachers and superstar work-based learning coordinators, but you're doing it all, and that's not the concept of CTE at all. Like it's physically impossible for you to maintain that, and it's not meant for you to do so. And so we will sort of reiterate and reinforce this with school leadership, as in some instances it seems like there's a disconnect there, and that's the expectation. And so we are going to make sure that this is a conversation we're having today at our meeting again, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that I have this conversation with school leadership, to just continuously reinforce and then start to help plan out the development of the CTE team in your school. And so today I'll talk through, other than the work-based learning coordinator and the CTE teacher, how the school counselor is involved, how the parent coordinator is involved, just really look at how the academic teachers are involved, and how do we do this as a team? How does that work combine? And so we'll definitely be talking about that. I also want to just kind of go back to as well the record keeping. So I'll tell you that the goal is that in CTS is where, once you've been approved, all of the documents that were approved will be stored in that documents tab in CTS. Prior to that, planning for approval, planning to prepare this application to be submitted to NYSED. I know that some schools have different ways of housing their documents. Some use Google Docs, some use just their own drives. Others are using SharePoint. I might suggest that you use SharePoint as sort of the common area if you're comfortable with that. But definitely, this is why I always say, just kind of have that conversation with your program quality manager, so that we can make sure what's best for you, what's most effective for you, what's the greatest access for you, especially when you're working remotely, so that this can be a smooth transition for you. So again, suggestion is SharePoint, but if there's other options or other platforms that you feel work best for you, as long as you're communicating that with your program quality manager, that's fine. Once we get you to approval, everything that we submitted that was approved, we're going to then store that should be uploaded into CTS under the documents tab. And then that's housed in preparation for your yearly evaluation. And then until that 5th year, we're looking for reapproval, we can sort of reassess the documents that were approved the first time. So that's sort of the plan with that. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
Mike Vanderputten had a comment, question in regards to the hardware to be able to use to access his technical assessment with Pearson and Certiport. So short of basically getting those how can I say, those devices in the kids' hands, right? If you look at some of the provisions which were released in P Weekly and sort of echoed through our office, is that you could actually have them put in for an extended permit to have students come in to the building, in which for them to be able to utilize and get prepped for their technical assessment. So you can do instructions and even later on when it's time to take the technical assessment, they would actually have that time through the extended permit process, which you would have to submit through your towards your superintendent for them to get the approval. I hope that answered your question, Mike. Because at this point, like I said, I know that our office has also been looking at a particular VPN access for students at home to access those computers and whatnot, but that are at this building. But with the extended permit, you'll be able to have the students come in as well.
I'll also say that we should have more information revolving around the extended permits and us being able to kind of get CTE students back into school buildings, not only for preparation for the technical assessment, but of course, to be able to complete and take the technical assessments. I think there's a lot of conversation right now as to, who's going to do it. Like if you're a teacher who is not planning on coming back into that building, then who can actually prepare these students and implement technical assessments? Do we want to use sort of central areas for different schools? Like we've talked to a lot of different alternatives, and I think there's a lot of conversation that also has to go on with the UFT, just to make sure that not only it's what's best for our students, but then also looking at the best situation for you as teachers, to make sure that we all feel like we're protected and taken care of in this process, but that we're making the best decision. So that's something that we're definitely going to continue that conversation. But I clearly feel like we have to make a final decision rather quickly, right? So that we can start planning for this accordingly. So that should be taking place. I see some of the comments in regards to particularly sort of our health programs, and the performance part is impossible, right, Maria, to implement at this time. And so we're trying to figure out like what are other options, right? So we're clear when we look in CTS and we're looking for grades for that. We understand that for now that'll be missing, but we're trying to figure out like what else can we do in place to sort of fill that void, and we don't have a clear answer, unfortunately, yet. And then I'll also say, today's meeting and every time we have a school leaders meeting, I get a few emails today asking, can I attend on behalf of my principal? I'm always, and please don't take this in any personal way, I'm always going to say, no, this is solely for the principal and assistant principals. I need to speak to your leadership, and I need to get certain points across to leadership, right? And it's not, and the conversations that we're going to have are not on a level of just having somebody turnkey it to them. Like, I want to have this conversation with your principal and your assistant principal and those who are making that decision. I also want them to have this conversation with each other, right? So we have a segment where the principals and APs are in conversations with each other. And so when a principal is like, there's just no way that this can be done, I can match them up with another principal that says, we're actually doing that. Here's how we do it. Do you want to meet? You wanted our schools to do this together? That sort of thing sort of happens. It happens every meeting, but I do want to have that conversation directly with your leadership. Lori, your principal decided today to retire? Are we serious?
No. Today was Mr. Scanlon, the principal of the school. He just didn't retire. Yeah, he had to leave due to other things. So yes, he is no longer the principal. Miss Mundy is the AP. but you know, I don't know. She also runs the math department. So that's why my concern is hoping that an AP, someone, not me, shows up to that meeting.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why I mentioned it earlier, because like you said,
Complete-
I don't want to be the only one here. I can't be.
I completely understand. Lori, can you remind me again your school?
John Adams High School.
That's right. That's right.
I know Miss Mundy said she's gonna, you know, she registered, but I, you know, think that there's got to be, she's not the only one. There are other, you know, people in there. I'm just saying it because I don't want to carry all that weight.
Absolutely. Nor should you. Nor can you. Let me be clear. Like that's, and we're clear about that. So we're going to continue to advocate on that end. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns, encouragement?
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm just listening to like everything you're saying. I mean, my frustration with my school, and my name is Ricky Sanchez. I'm from Aviation High School. Is just that at the end of the day, I mean, there's only so much assessment you can do on Zoom or Google Classroom. You know, if you were a CTE school, you got to have physical work. So I was going to type something in, but I just figured I'd just say it out loud. I mean, at the end of the day, um, you know, you can't really produce a number if your number is 0 or NA for almost since last March.
Right.
So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I know what you're saying about the state with our continuing endorsements, but you know, if you're a CTE program, you rely on physical work. That's the whole point of being CTE. Am I wrong on this, or?
Well, Ricky,
I mean,
again, that's you're correct, but that's very specific to aviation. So I can give you.
Well, I don't think it's not only specific to my school. I mean, I'm looking at, we have dental programs in here. We have people
Absolutely.
that rely on physical work.
Absolutely.
There's only so much virtual work you could do. You got to do physical work at the end of the day. So
I agree. I agree. I can also just rattle off 20 other programs that are very successfully doing their technical assessments remotely, right? So that's when I say specific to your program, I absolutely agree that the purpose of CTE is very much to be hands-on. However, there are a number of and it's specific to right industry sector that there are programs that very successfully again can do this remotely.
no, I understand what you're saying on that part, but I mean, maybe, you know, we should divide up, not to say divide CTE, but I'm just saying like CTE that can work virtually, but then what do you do about these CTE programs
Who
that
cannot?
you can't do it virtually?
Right.
So, I mean, in my school, it's, you know, we just can't assess on things. So, you know, it's an unending rule book that just kind of stays open-ended until whenever we reopen. But I got data that needs to be filled in for almost a year now that needs to get backed off.
Yeah, we've
I'll
specific.
turn off my mic.
No, Ricky, this is great conversation, and I'll say that we've specifically been talking about those CT programs in the industry sectors where you I can't do culinary arts over Zoom. I can't do automotive really over Zoom. I can't do my healthcare over Zoom. And I can kind of go. There's just as many programs that I'm talking about that have successfully done it remotely. There's just as many more that just absolutely cannot do it. And so I absolutely hear what you're saying there.
Yeah, that's what my question is. What are we doing for that aspect? That's the whole purposes of this vocational CTE programs to begin with is, you know, hands-on. So my principal says that there's this ongoing discussions between like all these higher ups about reopening CTE schools.
Right.
So I mean, I know this may not be the right forum for this, but what's the dialogue on this?
No, this is the perfect forum for it. So what you may have heard this earlier, but what we're doing for that is we've advocated specifically hearing what you're saying right now, which is 100% correct. We've advocated for the extended permits for schools to be able to open their school buildings back up so that you can, one, prepare for your technical assessments, and then to administer the technical assessments. Now, some of the challenges, as I mentioned earlier, were and continue to be making sure that all of the teachers are comfortable with coming back in and being able to do this. You're also, we know, going to have students who are going to say, listen, I'm not coming back in that building. And I know that this affects me completing my CTE studies. And so We're trying to figure out best ways to kind of get families comfortable with that, have this very specific to our CTE programs, so that it's only those students, though there are some of you where it's your entire school building, right? And so we have to figure out scheduling and also coverage, right? And making sure that the teachers are comfortable with that as well. So we heard you say this, you meaning you and your peers, and so we advocated for even when we felt like buildings were not going to open, that at least now we know they will be opening for us to prepare for technical assessments and administering it.
Mark, can I jump in real quick?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I was gonna jump in.
Sorry, yeah, Mike, I'll let you go right next. Like, I just want to continue on this sentiment. We were not able to get, and I say we because it's a collective thing, get this whole extended permit piece to the puzzle without principals advocating with their superintendents. So we need, when the teachers, like when you all are in these meetings, please, be a stickler with the principals and keep reminding them that they need to manage up these issues to their superintendents so that they can then speak with the deputy cows and the rest of them, so that this way, when they're hearing it come from both sides, they're hearing it coming from within Central and from the schools, that this is what's needed, then they'll be able to make the changes that we have. Otherwise, we are going to continue allowing ourselves to be boxed in with policies which do not fit our CTE models, right? Because we're going to allow ourselves to be boxed into where, when they make policies for a regular academic program and say that, oh, well, CTE is just the same thing, it's going to fit, or a lack of a better word, it's just an elective program, so it doesn't really matter, right? And we know there's a whole lot more substance to that. Mike, go ahead.
Yep. So, and again, hopefully it's snowing today, so there's a lot of snow. Hopefully this is tying into most people's thought process here as a CTE teacher is generally, like, if you were saying, okay, we're going to try and get these schools open enough so we can get them in. So my class is roughly 28. I have 2 of those classes. So that's, 40, 52 students I have to worry about, 56 students I have to worry about, whatever it is. And again, I can only have 10 at a time, but I have to teach my regular schedules. And then I've lost all this opportunity for the entire year for that hands-on, like exactly what Ricky's talking about. Like, those guys need practice working with the equipment, whether it be aviation, dental, video. They're not getting that. So when I'm splitting I have 2 parts of my exam. There's the the written and the practical. If I can't even get them to use the program to understand the questions for the written, but they haven't had access to the practical, I can't imagine in a month or 2, I can get these guys competent enough to feel like they're going to pass these assessments. Right. And it makes me nervous. And I know they need them to graduate, but I can't put my head around, like, with my time in teaching and then trying to come in and teach these guys and trying to find the space in school. And I'm the only teacher and I'm home with a health waiver, so I can't even go into school. So, and again, like you said, Omari, there's probably plenty of students out there who are going to be like, I ain't going into school either. My parents aren't letting me. I can't wrap my head around how to really make this work.
Yeah. And again, if you could, you'd have gotten a Nobel Prize, Mike. It's no, because I know those of you who know me and who have worked with me, I do try to get the lighter side of things. But I would say this much, and Seren put it in the comments, there's so many different variables. The best thing we can do is try to put out a plan and see how many of those students that we could meet, right? Like, we have to give the effort, right? And yes, we know for a fact that we're not going to get 100%. Okay, I mean, this is the reality, unfortunately, that we are in. However, that doesn't mean that we're going to give up, because if you can actually get 2 or 3 out of those kids to actually succeed, now we've added 2 or 3 who would have never had the opportunity. And that's where I would say that, while we may not have the answers to be able to address every scenario, please document your strategy and document the challenges, document the fails, right? And why, so that we can escalate these situations to the state. Because when you approve programs, let's say, for instance, the waiver does not go through and they still want to have when you have a drop in those numbers, it's going to be more than just simply saying, oh, well, it was COVID, so we couldn't do it. Well, then what? Because there are provisions that are being made by the Board of Regents in order to help the process. So did you not even try? And this is the thing that we want to show, that yes, our programs tried. Our programs, you know, did the best that they could, but because that X, Y, and Z reasons, this is the reason why these are the numbers that were able to be produced. Does that make sense to some folks? Yes, no? You can type in yes, no in the comments if you don't want to say anything. I just want to someone has also brought up the conversation again about the 54 hours, right? Here's what I would say, folks. As an approved program, those of you who are approved programs, keep in mind, 54-hour goal is the goal, right? It's a goal. It is a goal for that you would want to achieve in regards to, if you want to utilize CDOS. It's a goal that you are going to go towards as you want to stay within the Perkins 5 requirement. But it's a goal. In terms of endorsements, it is not a requirement, right? In terms of endorsing your CTE, your students with the CTE seal, you just have to be able to have the students had a WBL experience, all right, that fits the one that's quantifiable. So if the student has done any of those activities which are on the WBL grid, then they've fulfilled the WBL component of what it takes to endorse that diploma. So again, passing all 3 parts of the technical assessment, having a WBL experience, completed employability profile, and passing all the courses in the required sequence. So that's what you would need in order to check off the box and know that student is eligible to receive the CTE endorsement onto their graduation diploma. So again, 54 hours is a goal that, yes, for the Perkins, right? You're going to be measured under 2 different metrics. Did the students throughout the course of the program complete 54 hours of work-based learning? Did they exceed it, or did they not reach it at all, right? So that's what you're going to be based upon. The district as a whole has a goal of having, I think it was 65%, Amari? Or 67.
Yeah.
67% of the district of New York City as a whole would need to have met that goal. Now, what we are saying is that if every school is working towards that goal, then if a school happens to fall short, then another school may pick them up. But every school has to work towards that goal. And where we fall, we fall. You know, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, if for whatever reason, you know, like if we had, God forbid, we had another Sandy, right? Instead of it being COVID and things were knocked out. There's some sectors who may, in some areas, may not be even be able to provide students towards that number, right? There could be a slew of different things that could affect us reaching the goal. But again, it is a goal, and then we're going to report to state what our numbers are. And if it ends up being that we fall short, we would have at least some type of anecdotal information that we can then give them to show that this is the reason why we fell short. But we can't get that unless we get it from the schools. So we need each school to work towards that goal and document what you're doing and what your challenges are.
I'll also say to Mike's question and Joyce's question as well, that can the 54 hours be done virtually? Yes, they can. You'll see that there's been a push to look at other viable options such as mentoring, and you'll see a lot of that. So I think that a general consensus has been that most of our schools focus on the internship as the means to reaching 54 hours of work-based learning. And there are, as Kendall mentioned, there are other options that are there. So one of the recent ones you'll see pushed is the mentoring programs, and so we're trying to use that as a way to successfully reach those hours. But this was not necessarily a new requirement under Perkins, but has been a requirement under Perkins for funding eligibility, these 54 hours. But I do want to sort of reiterate and be clear that this is separate from CTE endorsement, right? So I think that it was clear to me in our office hours that many of us were under the understanding that obtaining 54 hours of work-based learning is what was necessary for a student to receive CTE endorsement. And that is not the case. Has nothing to do with endorsement at all, that number of 54 hours, but does have everything to do with your Perkins funding eligibility. And so I wanted to be clear about that. And it also has impact on your CDOS credentials as well.
Yeah. And just again, looking back into the chat, and just wanted to voice some of the comments. TOPS this year, the internships are limited to 15 hours. I mean, you know, in terms of resources and budgets and stuff like that, things have definitely been cut. But I would say this, folks, there's more to the work-based learning besides internships. And this is where the 54 hours is not something that needs to be done only in a student's senior year. The 54 hours is what's being evaluated over the course of their time in high school. So you want to be able to get those quantifiable experiences in that lead up to the internship, right? So yes, there's a strategy that some folks could use in regards to identifying those seniors right now who will be able to benefit from any WBL experience because they haven't had an opportunity to get any. But then you have to now assess your program and see what can you do for the early ones now, because there's some programs which are just too far gone. I'm just going to be very frank about it. Some people just didn't pay attention to it or didn't have the guidance, and were not able to really get things going early on. So now you're really at the mercy of whether this waiver comes in or not, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't do anything for the rest of the students who are coming into your program. And if you start with the sequencing, the WBL sequence that we've been asking all programs to create, you're going to create WBL interaction opportunities, even remotely, where students can actually be able to document the time. The state was gracious to give us an exception list for this year, that if the students engage in those exceptions, you can still keep those hours valid for when they're graduating. It doesn't disappear after this year once they've done those experiences.
I'll also add to that. I really want to encourage you, if you have not done so already, I'm going to refer you to that work-based learning activities grid. I want to give kudos to Kendall, who worked really hard on that with some of our other colleagues to make sure that you had all options open. And so if you access the work-based learning activity grid, then you'll be able to kind of figure out, like, how do I use community service, right? Internships is a struggle. We all know internships, but how do I use community service towards work-based learning hours? How do I use the job shadows, even remotely? How do I use job shadows towards work-based learning hours? As I mentioned earlier, the mentoring, right? Like, that's going to be a new push of ours across, so not just ACE mentoring, but like across multiple sectors. How are we using mentoring to really achieve the 54 hours of work-based learning hours? What about on-site projects? What about school-based enterprises? And for our health programs, really what are options for supervised clinical experiences, right? But Kendall set up a meeting with us. We had a meeting with CareerWise the other week regarding youth apprenticeship, and so I really encourage us all to really kind of take a look at that grid, and again, along with your program quality manager, we can get very creative as to how to make sure that your students do attain these goals, right? But there are ways, and you've heard me say this in other PDs, but a lot of times it could be things like we're just naming it the wrong thing. And in actuality, it is something else. And they have an abundance of hours already there, and they have their hours, right? And so these are things to just kind of really think through, but please, if you haven't, schedule some time with your program quality managers, really assess everything you're doing. I'm willing to bet that there are some areas where you're like, wait a minute, we are doing this. And I thought I had to call it this, but it's really that, and then, this does count towards work-based learning hours, right? And so think about that. Also just think through, as a society, we're changing pathways, right? So to be able to say that there are things that you just cannot do in my industry remotely. We used to say that about, healthcare, right? Like who ever thought about doctor's visits, on Zoom, right? But that's a legitimate thing now. And so really taking the time to kind of think creatively, like what could possibly work for my CTE program remotely that I can maybe incorporate as a shadow, as a mentorship, etc. So things to think through. But again, if I sit down with your program quality manager and really sort of hash this out so that we can make sure we create a plan together.
So I'm going to throw something in here. Joyce had said in the chat how the $15 an hour is the best incentive to motivate students. Well, you don't have to necessarily use that, and you can use that as incentive in different ways, right? And one way that when I was teaching, and it wasn't even in CTE, it was like just being a chemistry teacher. We had end of the year activities or the spring activities, and we did it with the students generational. Let's say different years. I would just say you have to do this in the 10th grade, 11th grade, and then in order to qualify for the opportunity in the 12th grade. So you can still use the 15 as an incentive. And again, even as budgets get cut and you may not have as many slots to offer students, you can also use that as a filtering process. How many students actually participated in these earlier activities that would lead up to the internship? You have a lot more students now going into those activities that make them better prepared for the internship. So you're going to be able to help fulfill a lot of different requirements and also just making sure the students are fully prepared for the activity. If you go back to that WBL sequence and make sure that students are communicated to them, this is what you have to do in order to be considered for this activity at the end. So that $15 one still would be there. It's just that you're not depending on that as the activity to quantify them for all the different opportunities that they can.
Yeah, sure. And I'll say Kendall and Joyce, to that point, passing or failing is also a great motivator, right? So like if it's a matter like this is your class, and if you complete this, you pass. If you don't, you do not. I think that's a great motivator. And I don't want to use this as sort of like a threat, right? Like that's not the goal, but say like, just as in any other class, if I attend class and I do well, then I'll pass the class. And if not, then I may not pass it. I think that's a great motivator, especially for your what's nicely called your completers, but like your seniors or those who are graduating. It's a great motivator to complete some of the things that they may have wanted to be paid for, but they're not. But it's going to get them to graduate with a CTE endorsement and possibly move on to college and that sort of thing.
Just a quick time check. We have about 4 minutes left. And I also want to just add on to what Omar just said. And these are some of the things that when we're doing an external review of program, and so you folks can be aware, we always ask what are students doing, or what are teachers, I should say, doing in the school to help students who are falling behind, right? So so this is something, again, that if you put in that type of a structure, you still want to be able to speak with your administration so that they have time in which that folks would be able to get support so that they could pass the courses and they could be competitive in these opportunities and stuff like that because they are limited.
Joyce, think about even with your industry presenters, if they could do it 2 or 3 times, then this will count towards work-based learning hours. You've heard us sort of say over and over how this year only, there are certain things that are allowed that will count towards it. So again, certain things that you're already doing and you're doing a great job with, and let this sort of continue and count towards the different goals that we have for our students. Mm-hmm. We in the chat, thank you, Tanya, for putting in the chat our exit ticket. I'm going to ask if you could all please complete this exit ticket. We do have only 2 minutes left in here, but as you see on the screen, also being shared is the contact information for our entire team. Please reach out to your program quality manager. If we can just sit down and just map out the plan to succeed for the remainder of this school year, we will, right? Let's definitely make sure that we do that. So feel free to contact us. But again, please, if you can complete the exit ticket. I do want to thank you all for joining us in this workshop. We do appreciate you guys being here. Again, thank you to Kendall. Great job today with just helping us to think through assessment and accountability. Thank you, Tanya, for just kind of helping us kind of flow through today's workshop as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Maury. Thank you, Tanya. Someone just add this to a last question in about community service can be in person, even though internships cannot. Basically, the DOE doesn't want us to be associated right now with any in-person activities that are outside of the school building. This is what, unfortunately, we're being pigeonholed into that particular criteria. What I could say is that another aspect of this extended permit is that if you happen to need assistance from a particular student or have students work on something, or your building has the capacity that something needs to take place during that extended permit, like you have the permit in from 3 to 6, but then the class time, that your engagement time is going to be half an hour to 45 minutes to an hour, and then you have to rotate the kids. What is that kid doing when they're not there? Do you have the capacity in the building for them to do something at that point? That could be a community service project or on-site project or something like that while they're there. There's different things that we can try to work on in terms of thinking outside the box to do that. But you cannot send a student out right now to do something on their own and then take the credit for it, because then that may have an adverse effect on you when it comes down to legal.
Omari and Kendall, what was the workshop originally titled? Because we're getting some questions about which drop-down folks should choose.
Yeah, the workshop was originally entitled NICET Application and External Review. So if they didn't change that in the exit ticket, apologies. But you can look for it as NICET approval and external review process.
I'm not sure if this is, I'm looking at this, I'm not sure if this is the correct list for it. That's why we don't see it there.
I think that the one that's in, I think they're gonna look out for one separately, folks, I guess, that you're gonna receive from them. I think this is the one that we normally do during our regular PDs.
Yeah. So our apologies, you'll probably receive a different exit ticket at the end of today's conference. Again, guys, thank you so very much for joining us here. I do hope that you get to really participate in the rest of today's activities and workshops. A great lineup today, so please do attend. But thank you again, guys.
Yeah, you have a little break right now, folks. The next session starts at 11 to 12:15. We will hang around here until folks transition over. Any last minute questions, but thank you again for attending. Yeah, so you don't do the exit slip that we put into the chat at this moment for this session.
Okay, thank you all. It was very helpful.
Thank you very much. Joyce, good to see you.
Omari, is the recording stopped now?
Uh-oh, you gotta say something? Let me hold it.
All right, I'll show my face briefly. Good to see you all, and thank you.
Thank you, you too.